Hello everyone, my name is Chrissy and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a book review of In Other Lands by Sarah Reese Brennan, and this book is about a young boy named Elliot who ends up going through this portal into another world where he can join this magical school and choose between a warrior type course load or being a counselor in training. Now, the magical world that he steps into is full of very magical creatures such as elves, dwarves, trolls, harpies, so on and so forth. And the book subsequently follows his journey throughout those school years, from when he, I believe, is 14 until I think going into 17. First thing to note about this novel is that the narration of this novel is particularly interesting to me because when we first start out, we get third-person limited perspective from Elliot, and we follow that through the novel, but in the beginning we get this really snarky, sarcastic narrative that's just really funny, and it kind of mellows out towards the end, and that kind of follows along Elliot's personality and his journey throughout the novel. I thought that was particularly well done. The pacing goes along really well in the novel, with the first bit being, I think, in a little slower of a pace line to really set scene and story and descriptions of everything that's going on. A thing to note that, yes, this is a fantasy novel, but I think when you go into it, if you are looking for really tight and really descriptive world building, then this may not be the novel for you. This book is very much about Elliot and the relationships he has throughout his formative years while he's coming of age. So if you're, looking for all the rules about government of this novel, this is not really the book for that, I think. We do delve a little bit into relations between other races and kind of how things come to be, but it is not the greatest bit of world building that I've seen, but I don't think it's really meant to be. So keep in mind, this is a very, very character-centered novel. With that being said, let's jump into the characters. The first character that we have is our main character, and that is Elliot. And as you can see, he is kind of an unhappy camper when he is shown in the novel. And this isn't just because he came into the Borderlands and they don't have, plumbing, but he's kind of unhappy even before he goes to the Borderlands. He is very much a flawed character, and I enjoyed that a lot. Elliot insults almost everyone he meets, and he's not particularly the kindest individual, and he doesn't really think about his words when he's talking to others, and he's very much on kind of the attack. Now, that's not to say that he's not a likable character as far as a reader's perspective. I think he is. I think he's one of those main characters who, when he insults others, you're laughing a lot with it. Granted, with that said, at some points I kind of wanted to, if there was a physical embodiment of Elliot in front of me, I would shake him and say, that's not the way you make friends, sunshine. The author just does a really good job of giving Elliot's backstory and why he is the way he is and why he says the things that he does. That he is very much a scared kid. I think he's really afraid of just being alone, and that he is going to end up alone, and that no one's going to really put up with his actual thoughts and his mind. I think that's a really relatable stance to be in. That all of us have a need and a want to be around people who just like us for us, that we can actually show kind of our worst selves and that someone will still stick around. And Elliot is very much the personification of that thought. Also, did I mention that he's bisexual? Elliot is a bisexual character, so we do have some LGBTQ representation in this book. And I say that with Elliot, but he's not the only character that represents that community. I think Elliot is a great main character that we have, and I'm actually really glad that I finally read a novel where the main character is very, very obviously flawed. That's not a true anti-hero. I don't feel anti-hero-y vibes around Elliot, but he is a very flawed person. It's just nice to see, because I feel like so many times in in these type of novels that the main character, like, people don't like, but there's not actually a reason that people don't like this main character. There just isn't. Or it's this really contrived reason. But for Elliot, it's because he constantly insults people, and that's a really good reason not to like somebody. Now, another character that we see is Serene, who is an elf that Elliot befriends when he first makes the camp, and really he actually falls in love very heavily with Serene. And I think what I like most about Serene's character is not just that she's loyal or she's very blunt and forthright, but also that in this world of the Borderlands, elves have the kind of reverse society of the patriarchy. It's very much a matriarchy, where women are the ones who protect men, but it very much falls in line with like masculine stereotypes, but with women. So Serene is constantly saying, oh, you poor men with your hormones and emotions, and we have to protect you. And it's this really just funny way of seeing things and of seeing how gender stereotypes, when reversed, sound so ridiculous. And granted, they sound ridiculous either way. But when it's flipped over like that the reasonings aren't very sound for either direction. So, for example, when they talk about, the men raising children in the elven society, they say, well, the women have to have that pain and that suffering for that really intense moment, so it's up to the men to have the long-term suffering. And it's just a really interesting way to look at things. I really enjoyed that aspect of this novel, and that, one of the reasons why gender stereotypes are just ridiculous in and of the first place. Then one of the other main characters is Luke Sunborn. Luke is another character who is in the warrior training course, and he is another friend of Serene. He's kind of a pseudo-friend of Elliot's, kind of, sort of. Elliot professes his immense dislike of Luke from the get-go, just because Luke is kind of the opposite of Elliot in many, many different ways. Whereas Elliot kind of has a very big personality in that he says what he wants, and he just doesn't really have a filter between his brain and his mouth, and he's kind of on that attack constantly, verbally. Whereas Luke is a fairly quiet person. It's kind of odd because he kind of likes being in the limelight to be liked, but at the same time he kind of likes being kept to himself for the most part. So they're very opposite ends. They're also opposite in the way that Elliot is not liked, by a lot of people. He makes friends with Serene, but for the most part there's not really a whole lot there as far as friendships. And then Luke has everyone wanting to be his friend. So it's kind of this nice contrast between the two that we get throughout this novel. Those are the three main characters, and it's pretty much about the relationships between all three as they go. Now, there are a whole bunch of side characters that come in and out, and some are far more well-rounded than others, but for the most part, I think the author does really well with characters throughout. Overall, I really like this book, and I think it's a nice kind of, I want to say, light-hearted fantasy, but there are kind of tough moments as far as what the characters are feeling and going through. But for the most part, I think it's just a really fun read. So I do recommend this book for anyone who likes to read kind of more lightish-hearted fantasy. I do very much characterize this book as a young adult novel. So whether that's important to you, whether it's labeled young adult or not, there's that. Please let me know down in the comments whether you've read this novel and what you thought about it. If you liked this video, please give it that thumbs up button. If you like seeing this space talk about books, hit that subscribe button. And as always and forever, may you get lost in a book.